So let's get started today. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We have an excellent program with Rich Yep. But before we get started, I just wanted to bring up a couple of housekeeping items. We always put our questions in the chat box, since the chat box during these webinars seems to be very active and we don't want to have to toggle back and forth between question answer. I always mention the next program, which is in June, and it's going to be on a communications topic. So look for information about that. And we also, for the first time, are going to have a program in July on succession planning, I believe. We don't usually do programs in the summer. We definitely don't do one in August because ASAEs asks us not to do one in August since their annual meeting is in August, but we are going to do one in July. So look for information on that program coming right up. So now I'll turn it over to our monthly program coordinator, Diana Lee Tucker, and she's going to introduce our speaker today.
Thank you, Sherry. We are so pleased to bring you Rich Yep, CAE-FASAE. He's the founder of Ocean Vista Advisors, but he also serves as the vice president for Vetted Solutions, an executive search firm that has worked with many associations. He served for 24 years as CEO of the American Counseling Association. And on the volunteer side, he has put in many years serving ASAE as past chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and on the board of directors. Among his many honors, he was named ASAE Fellow in 2012, and in 2017, he received ASAE's prestigious Key Award. So we are very pleased to bring you Rich Yep. Rich, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Diana, and thanks, Sherry. I appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you. We have a full-packed agenda here in terms of the stuff I'd like to cover. I will tell you, just like Diana said, I was an association CEO for about 24 years, and now I work with Vetted Solutions. And, quite honestly, I was actually a client of Vetted when I was a CEO, and I knew when I wrapped up my time at ACA, I wanted to help others find the right fit in terms of, their career aspirations. And I really, like being at that intersection of talent acquisition and diversity and those close personal relationships that make a search successful. So I'm really happy to be here. And like I said, the short time that we have together, I'm going to try to cover a lot of stuff with you. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can start right up. Okay, so I'm assuming you can see that okay. If not, you'll let me know. And again, what we want to make sure of is we want to make sure that we answer the questions you might have. So what do you hope to get from this particular webinar? And go ahead and you can put your response in the chat box and we'll go from there. So what I want to make sure of is I want to give you an overview of what we'll cover. Part of it is how to get noticed if you're thinking about a career change, and how do you do this in terms of reacting as if it were a project with a timeline. So it's not just, oh, I think I'll look for a new job, but there's actually a whole process that's involved, as all of you know. And there are a number of tasks that I would suggest that you undertake. There are commitments that you will need to make. And just like a good association professional, you need to have a plan and know how to work it. So what we'll cover today is the current executive search landscape. And what I'm going to share could be applicable whether you are using or going through an executive recruiter or if you're just looking for a new job on your own. So I want you to understand how today's job market is more competitive and dynamic than ever before. Also, as you know, with the changes going on at the federal government, there are other people who are actively searching for a new position. Now, the good news there is all of you who are in association work already have kind of a leg up on people who haven't really looked for a job for many, many years and aren't used to maybe interviewing, because some of you are. So that gives you a little bit of an advantage. Sometimes I get the question, do you think there are going to be many things opening up in the next, 6 to 9 months, whatever. And I do think there are positions that are opening up. Some people think that associations are maybe a little hesitant. Maybe they're watching what their finances are, and maybe they're not going to be engaging in hiring. But there's still a lot of stuff that's going on, a lot of projects that need to be completed and worked on. So I do see that the market's still pretty robust. Hopefully it'll continue to be like that. So I want to talk to you about what recruiters are looking for in top candidates. And then I'll share with you those things that we as recruiters look for, and those things that you might want to also be aware of in terms of what you need to do so that we do see who you are. So I'm going to talk about, and some of these are very basic, but I think they're really important. As hokey as it may sound, you do need your own personal brand, right? It's important for people, whether they're recruiters or organizations that are just hiring on their own, to know who you are as a professional and as a leader and as a colleague, how you work together with others. And I think that building a clear, authentic, personal brand that communicates whatever your vision is really important. And we're not talking about building a brand like we're launching a new soda, right? What we're saying is all the stuff that you've already done in your career, how you have experienced things, how you relate to different issues, this has formed what your brand is. You already have a brand. It's just how are we making it more noticeable to those who might be in the hiring space. So we want to make sure that your online and offline presence are consistent and professional. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few moments. So again, developing a strong personal brand, that's something that, clearly articulates what sets you apart as a leader, both online and in your elevator pitch. And I'll go over that in a second. But I think that consistency is really important too. What you have on your resume should reflect what you have on LinkedIn and other networking types of conversations that will build not only credibility, but also what I call memorability, right? We want to remember who you are in whatever space you might be in. So let's talk about crafting our resume. Now, in the old days, when I first started out in the business, like 100 years ago, we only had one resume. We didn't have the benefit of computers where we could digitally change things fairly quickly. Today, you can do that. And it's important to take advantage of being able to tailor your resume for each opportunity that you may be interested in applying for. The other thing is, I really like to see a focus on results and impact, not just your duties. And again, the benefit of a computer is that you can tailor that resume based on what you see in the job description for the place you're applying at. So the other thing I often say to people is don't waste the valuable real estate, which is that top half of the first page of your resume. I expect you to know how to use Microsoft Word. I don't need you to put that on there that you know how to do that. I want to know why you're unique and why you're qualified for the job that I'm trying to fill. And again, going back to quantifiable achievements, strong action verbs, all that stuff, but the quantifiable achievements is really important. Whether you increase membership by 22%, whether you increase the association's portfolio by $2 million, whatever it might be, something quantifiable. The other thing I'll say is I happen to see a lot of cover letters, right? And I don't want to just hear in your cover letter the stuff that's already on your resume. My expectation is that you're going to tell me how what you have done in your time as an association professional aligns with what I'm looking for. It's about me, the organization that's hiring, not about you, because I learned about you through your resume. So you want to align your skills and experience with what the employer is searching for. Okay. So when you craft a compelling executive resume or profile, there should be a concise executive summary that showcases your leadership. I will tell you that I see a lot of resumes that say I am a mission-driven association professional. Well, okay, great. I mean, you all are. We all are, right? We're all mission-driven in some way. Who's going to say they're not? So again, you have to balance off using too much of that valuable real estate with stuff that's kind of a no-brainer, to be quite honest, right? Um, I do want to know about your leadership experience. I do want to know about key accomplishments or recognitions. I want to know what that unique value proposition is and what you will bring to the table, because that's what helps a recruiter or anybody who's hiring, why you fit for a senior role in management or whatever it is you might be applying for. Okay. And I'll hit it one more time in terms of the quantifiable achievements. Your resume, your LinkedIn profile, I love to see metrics and specific examples that illustrate your impact. Again, revenue growth, cost savings, team development, things like that. Okay. I know some of this seems pretty basic, but I think it's always good to keep hearing it over and over so that you can keep all of that in mind. All right. Some people ask about, is it that important about what I have on LinkedIn or my other digital profiles? I think it's really important to optimize what you have on your LinkedIn profile. I think there needs to be a compelling headline or a summary, or even if you have endorsements. I do think that engaging with relative content and expanding your network strategically online is important. So whether you are part of ASAE Collaborate groups or you post things that you see on LinkedIn that are relevant to association management or some issue you're interested in, it's important that you put something up there. It's important that you engage. And as LinkedIn is just like a lot of the other platforms, is based on how many times you post or how many times you use it or how many times you like something and then repost something with some comment. These are things that get noticed. These are things that are important to people who are looking for qualified talent. So I would really encourage you to, for example, polish your online presence. And what I mean by that is ensuring that LinkedIn and your other professional profiles are up to date. All right. Highlight those achievements, use industry specific keywords. You want to be discoverable. And that doesn't just mean with recruiter bots going out and looking for keywords. It's also just regular old recruiters looking for people who will see these things that you post on your site. So we do look for candidates online, but we also do a lot of phone calling. When we do a search at Vetted, for example, we may make up to 200 or 300 calls to people, and it may be people who we know might refer other people, or it might be people that we think their experience aligns with the position that we're trying to fill. So again, I think a strong digital footprint is really crucial. So rather than having to write a lot of stuff down, if you want me to send you kind of a summary at the end of what I've been talking about, my email address will be at the end. You can just email me and I'll send it to you. So I want you to focus on what we're going through right now. So when we talk about networking with a purpose, I'm really talking about how you develop genuine relationships with industry peers and with mentors and recruiters. I think it's really important to attend industry events, for those issue areas that you're really involved in or interested in, and to also participate in professional associations. So whether it's ASAE or Association Forum, if you're in the Midwest, or any of the state SAEs or any PCMA, any of them are really important. If you have an opportunity to present, I would definitely make sure that you do that, whether it's, again, at any of the major conferences or other association related things. And then I think that it's really important, if you have time, and I know that's hard, we all have really busy lives, to volunteer. Doesn't always have to be a year-long or a 3-year-long commitment to ASAE. It could be a micro-volunteer opportunity. It could be something like helping to coordinate association exchange, right? It can be any number of things, but that's all really important because it gets you visibility and it shows that you're networking for a specific reason and a specific purpose. It tells me something about you. Again, I think engaging and networking on a consistent basis is really important. When you build relationships with recruiters like me or other industry peers, because I may not call you directly, but I may call one of your peers who will say, oh, I know so-and-so who might be really good for that. Again, online discussions, when you see stuff that's posted on LinkedIn, and it's like, oh, this is kind of interesting, go ahead and post something, you know? It's important to really nurture connections over time so you develop that reputation as a thought leader, as an association peer, whatever you want to call it. And then in terms of being proactive in your outreach, don't wait to be found, right? Identify recruiters who specialize in your field and reach out to us, with a tailored introduction, highlight your experience, talk about your interests in future opportunities. The great thing is we have these amazing databases that we use. So if we make contact with you, you end up in our database. And that's a good thing in this case. Okay. Now I will do questions and answers at the end. So I don't know if you have something you want to share or talk about, but we can get to that to the end. Preparing for interviews. It's important to prepare for an interview like an executive, right? My expectation is that you well research the organization you're being interviewed by and the role that you're applying for in a very thorough way. You need to know your audience. You need to read their 990s. You need to go to their website. You need to talk to anybody you know who might have worked there or currently works there. But I would not make a cold call, okay? Only contact that person if you have a relationship with them. Otherwise, it's going to look kind of creepy. I think it's important when you prepare for interviews to prepare stories that showcase what your leadership has been about, how you did problem solving, how you achieved certain results in the things that you did at your current employer or past employers. I want you to be able to lean in and quickly figure out how best to communicate with those you're talking to during an interview. Oftentimes I'll see people, they're going on and on and on, kind of like I am right now. They're going on and on, but they're not really reading their audience. You need and it can be a little harder on Zoom, but other ways it can be easier on Zoom because you get a picture of their face and you can see if they're sort of checking out or if they're engaged and they're nodding their head, things like that. So if you're being brought forward by a recruiter, my expectation is that you'll ask that recruiter lots of questions about the organization, the position profile, the search committee, who am I going to be talking to? You want to find out, for example, like, why are they hiring this position, right? Is there somebody who was in it and left, or is this a new position, whatever it might be? You want to find out what the most salient issues are that face that organization. So I'm going to keep buzzing along here. I think executive presence, like I said before, is really important. What I mean by that is having confidence and clarity and emotional intelligence in all of these interactions that we're talking about, whether they're online interactions, whether they're on Zoom, whether they're at conferences. If you're posting a response to something on LinkedIn, or if you're interviewed for an article or a trade publication, it's important to have that executive presence. And then to practice really, I can't stress enough, active listening and communication skills. If you don't know what this entails, active listening and strong communication, go ahead and Google it. Okay, that's fine. Just Google it and find out what they say, and then see if you match up with that. And if not, what you need to do to get there. So following up, saying top of mind, this is the usual stuff, right? You get an interview, make sure you send a thank you note. But it should also be a thoughtful follow-up message after an interview. Think about something that triggered you there in that interview. And then to stay in touch with people like me, stay in touch with recruiters and contacts. You want to provide value where possible. You might actually recommend to me somebody else for a certain job, not one you want, but another job, and I'll remember who you are. Okay, learning and adaptability, and we're rolling toward where we need to sort of stop. So I am going to say that it's important to show your commitment to professional growth. Like I said, I've been in the business for a really long time. I'm still going to webinars. I'm still learning stuff every day. So it's important to show your commitment to professional growth and how you stay current in the field. I think that highlighting any recent certifications or courses or new skills. I know a lot of you probably have done the University of Florida DE&I training, and that's great. It's kind of passé now because it's been around for a while, but if you have it, you should list it and any other new ones that you have, especially in areas that are of special interest to associations. Could be in AI, it could be what's going on with the federal administration, it could be anything. So again, really important to stay current. So I'm going to quickly just go over what the key takeaways were in our short time together. We talked about online presence. We talked about having a compelling profile. Again, demonstrating quantifiable achievements, whether that's in your resume or when you're actually in an interview. Tell me the impact you had. I want to hear the qualitative stuff as well, but I also want to know quantitatively what you did. And then we talked about personal brand, what you might want to do there. In terms of making sure that you engage with our community, with your peers, with the industry in general, so you get known for things. You want to be really proactive in your outreach. And when we talk about your elevator pitch, it really needs to be something that, when you connect with a recruiter, you need to have a concise summary ready that covers your top skills and your leadership style, your career trajectory, whatever you want to call it. This needs to reinforce your executive presence and your readiness for a senior role. And lastly, just researching the right recruiters. It's important to research and target the recruiters that focus on things that make sense to you. So I would make sure that you do that, and then ask people for feedback after you go through an interview. The last thing I'll say is, what is one action that you will work on this week to advance your job search? You don't have to put it in the chat box if you don't want to. You can just make sure that you think about that and you decide what you might want to do. Okay. So with that, that was a fast 23 minutes. We'll go through any questions and answers. And then, like I said, I'm happy to send you sort of a summary of what I was just covering. There's my email address there at Vetted. So I thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thanks, Rich. And any questions, please put it in the chat. There were a few that came up when you asked for what people were interested in hearing today. Here's one question. What do career pathways look like now?
Oh, that's a great question. They're all over the map. That's the good news. So you can come from anywhere as long as what you've done can relate to what, for example, a recruiter is searching for. So sometimes people say, well, is it better if I come from the industry I represent? Or is it better that I'm more of a generalist and I know association management? The answer is both answers are correct. It really depends on what the association is looking for in terms of those qualities and those skills that they need to fill.
Thanks, Rich. There was a question about supervisory experience, and for someone who's had many years of experience but not direct supervisory roles, what can they do?
Right. So that's where you need to be creative, and it doesn't mean you need to fake it. What it means is you need to figure out, okay, what have I done that matches the qualifications of somebody who has officially supervised a large staff or whatever. It could be a group of volunteers. It could be chairing a committee. It could be any of those things. But if you do have actual experience supervising, that's terrific. But I also think it's important to be creative and really think through, what have I done that could demonstrate that I have managed a budget, that I have managed people, that I have coordinated or organized or sort of tried to organize volunteers, which we know is like one of the biggest challenges, right?
Another question is about the resume itself and how, with everything that you've shared, with the professional certifications and training and experience, how can that all fit in the 2 pages? Like, is it bad? What's the appropriate length? What's a good length for a resume?
I really would like you to keep it to 2 pages max. There are some really cool designs out there now, and whether you get them off the internet or you have a professional resume writer help you, that's fine too. But again, keep in mind that a recruiter or an HR director is going to be looking at a lot of resumes. So yours needs to stand out. And I don't mean on orange paper with purple type, but something where the words really catch that person and make sure that they're going to put you in the pile of, we need to follow up with this person.
So in today's current economic environment, how much are you seeing? What's the search landscape right now? How much are associations using outside recruiters for the non-CEO or non-VP positions?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a number of searches going on for non-CEO positions. We also recruit for board positions too, but I'm seeing a lot of like director level and senior director, so C-suite without being CEO searches going on. And there's a bunch that, I mean, we don't have them all, but we do focus just on associations and nonprofits. But the other firms, the boutique firms like us and even the big ones, are continuing to hire and look for non-CEO association management positions.
Are you seeing, are you finding that associations are looking for association background professionals or subject matter experts for chief level positions?
That's a good question, and it does vary, like I was saying earlier, but it really comes down to making sure, and this is part of our job as recruiters, to make sure that organizations understand the value of an association management professional. Whether you have a CAE or not, but the fact that this is what your profession is, as opposed to being a banker or a lawyer or a healthcare person or whatever else. So there are certain jobs where they are going to say, look, you have to be from our industry, but there are way more where you don't need to be from the industry, but you do need to know how to manage an association.
That's a great question.
And continuing along the veins of that specialized experience. So a question has come up about a background being really rooted in a specific area, like leading large scale meetings and conferences, which might appear narrow to a recruiter or narrow the perception of the experience. What's the advice on how to better position this background when you're pursuing a broader operational leadership role?
Well, I think that, again, you need to be creative and think, okay, so I oversaw a really successful annual conference. It had 500 exhibitors and 20,000 people. Well, there are a lot of skills involved in planning that event that relate to a number of other roles within an association. There's the finance aspect, there's the volunteer coordination aspect, there's the membership aspect. So you need to be able to not look like you were stuck in a silo so much, but you worked, across silos, if you will, with membership, finance, and whatever to hit our revenue goals, blah, 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 blah. Again, what was the impact overall to the entire association? If you brought in 20% of the total revenue, you need to include that, right?
So how do you pitch yourself for the next level up when you're against other candidates who might already be at that level?
Yeah, the thing is that if you're hiring, let's say we're hiring a chief marketing officer, it isn't that you definitely are looking for another chief marketing officer from another association to come in and take that slot. You might because of the skill set they have. But again, if you're director of marketing, but you've done a lot of these things that are in the position profile, you need to go for it. You need to throw your hat in the ring. And even if you get an interview, but you don't get the job, follow up with the recruiter and say, where was I deficient, or what did the final candidate have that I didn't? That gives you more intel to figure out what you need to do the next time.
Here's another question. Is it true that recruiters are using AI or SEO to find keywords? And if your resume or cover message doesn't have that, are you kicked out of the search automatically?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I get that one all the time. What I will tell you is that at our firm, we don't do that. And while it's possible that the larger firms do, usually for searches like this, when we're looking for, it's a pretty specialized field, right? Association management, and with whatever the specialty area might be, finance, marketing, publications, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, there's a possibility, but again, this is why it's important to get on my radar, why it's important to get on the radar of my colleagues who work at the other firms. And you get on that radar not by asking me to go to coffee or anything, but maybe what you're doing on LinkedIn or what you're doing within the ASAE volunteer space.
Someone has observed that they're not seeing many senior association roles posted online right now. So where's the best place to start a search?
So you can certainly go to, whether it's the Vetted Solutions site, or you got Heidrick and Struggles, Russell Reynolds, all the other ones, and see what they're posting. Sometimes, and this is part of what we do, is that it'll be a confidential search. And that's because the association, for one reason or another, does not want everyone to know that that particular association is looking for a new blah, 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 right? So it may not be posted for a while. It may not be posted ever. But we do, I will say, we do use Career HQ from ASAE, and we do some of the other ones as well. Sometimes you can get a hint by looking at like CEO update. When you look at the transition area there, like, oh, so-and-so just left that organization. I wonder who's going to be handling the search for their replacement. It's kind of like being a private eye. You got to like dig up stuff.
Here's another question. What would you suggest someone do when they have been in competition among multiple candidates for a CEO role, but they've lost it, several times? So should they do mock interviews? What other tips could you recommend? Or is it just luck of the draw?
It's not luck of the draw necessarily, but I think the first thing you should do is you should give yourself a big pat on the back. If you made it all the way to the interview stage and there were like 100 people applying for the job or 500 people applying, the fact that you made it to that says a lot about you as a person and about your experience, your talent, your qualifications. So I do think it's important to ask a recruiter to be honest with you and to say, where do you think I slipped up, or where do you think the other person had a better connection? And that's what it might be. It might be, well, the committee it was a flip of the coin. I kind of don't think so. It's usually there is something, and your job is to just ask what that something was. Sometimes you're not going to be able to find out. Sometimes you're not going to be able to make any change. Sometimes it might be, well, it came down to a person that had a CAE and a person that didn't. And that was the only thing. I actually have seen that at times, but you need to find out. So if you have been up for a job a couple of times and you haven't made it, okay, for A, sorry you didn't make it, but B, you really need to like congratulate yourself for getting that close to things.
So how do recruiters perceive candidates asking for that feedback? Is that something that recruiters are open to sharing?
I am, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues would be as well from the other firms. I think it's important because I would not have put the time into researching you and talking to your references and moving you forward if I didn't think there was something really special that you brought to the table. Because we're not trying to just fill a slate. We will only put people on a slate that we think are actually truly qualified for that position, which means we think highly of you. So yeah, I just ask, find out.
The CAE has come up a couple of times in the questions. Is that a credential that's still a boost to your resume? Is it losing relevance? And what can they do beyond that?
Okay, well, as Diana knows, since we served on the CAE commission, we think it's like a really important thing to have. The question is whether or not is it going to make a difference to all associations? The answer would be no, not to all associations. But I would want to do whatever I could to ensure that if it was going to come down to one candidate or another, that if it came down to the CAE, that I had it, right? It does prove to a lot of associations who are doing hiring that you have taken that step to jump through that hoop, to learn what those principles are, to know what the domains are, and that you are an association professional that could jump in and do a lot of these things, right? So ultimately, is it going to be a deal breaker? In some cases, maybe, but in a lot of cases, probably not, but it's still important. Don't know if that helped, but.
Well, yes, and I agree that the CAE is very important. So thank you for that, Rich. A question about the when you talked about all the training, and there are those of us who enjoy taking a lot of the courses, like on LinkedIn, but they might be in shorter duration. So should what the instinct is not to litter the profile with all the series of short courses, but what is your take on that?
I like to know that you've voluntarily taken those courses, that you have been willing to advance your career or your profession. Sorry if you can hear that background noise. It'll go away in just a second. But what I would really say is that it is important. Now, you may not have to list every last little thing, but if you say what your continuing education or professional development has been, and you include areas like AI in associations, or the role of a diverse board in the governance of an association, whatever it might be, I do think it's important to put down, because it says something to me, and it says something to people who are hiring, that, oh, this person isn't just writing on the experience they have, they're open to new ideas. And that's where I love to see that link when someone says, well, I took this really like brief course on AI, and this is how I think it could help associations. And then that starts a discussion you have with whoever the search committee is, right?
In LinkedIn, you see the little green strip that says, looking for work. Are recruiters looking at that or taking particular notice?
Oh, I mean, I notice it because it's a green link on there or whatever, but it doesn't really, I'm going to find out what your work history is, right? And if you're currently working, but you're looking for work, I'm going to ask you, well, why are you looking? If you haven't worked for a while, I'm going to say, okay, why haven't you worked for a while? But I did, a lot of times people used to say, oh, what if I have this big break in the time, like I stopped to raise a family, or I, have another concern with something else, and then I had to stop for a while. I'm okay with that. And I think a lot of organizations understand that life gets in the way of the things that we do in terms of our work. So in the old days, I think it was more of, why is there this big gap? And now it's more of me just saying, tell me about that gap, and what you learned, or what you did, or what your experience was.
Thanks, Rich. And I think one of the last questions, and we know it starts with Vetted Solutions, but you had mentioned the other recruiting firms. And so I think someone had asked for you to repeat the other names.
No. Okay. So the other firms, So just so you know, in the executive recruitment space, there's something called the SHREKs, SHREK, because that represents the initials are like S is Spencer Stewart, H is Heydrich and Struggles, R is Russell Reynolds, E is one that I can never remember, and K is Korn Ferry. And then in terms of the boutique firms, there's Vetted Solutions. There's a few others that have Sterling Martin does a lot of placements as well. And let's see, Koya is another one, Koya. They're based more in the Midwest, but they do a lot of placements in the DC area as well. And there are more. So this wasn't a paid advertisement for the 7 of us that I just mentioned, but those are the ones that come to mind the quickest.
So thank you, Rich, so much for doing this for us today. Thank you so much for your time and your invaluable expertise. I hope everybody will join us in June and again in July for another AXC. Thanks, everybody, and have an awesome day. Bye.